So guys, another round of crazy Russia news, again continuing to pour out of the savage Russian hell state before we get into the spiraling fuel crisis that's now affecting 84% of Russia's regions. We've got the Polish and Romanian authorities operations yesterday that busted up Russian saboteur operations mailing incendiary packages via courier in the EU. This is the things that Russians are doing in Europe, all over Europe now. We got two oil refineries in the EU burning last night, Hungary and Romania burning this morning. Now, who would be interested in doing something like that? We've got Russian regions now complaining that they only have 1% of the funds needed budgetarily to last for the rest of the year, begging the federal government for assistance. We've got the spiraling Russian bond crisis. We've got Putin expanding his program of arresting musicians. Another arrested today. It all started with just merely singing songs in public that featured phrases like "the old man in the bunker" and "when the Tsar dies." Several other stories, but we'll start here with, this is in Rostov, the film you've been watching here. Russian air defense doing what it does best and raining air defense missiles on its own people with a whole neighborhood. It looks like the whole damn neighborhood was taken out. I don't know. In Ukraine, they keep air defense systems aimed away from residential neighborhoods, but it seems in effort to take down these Ukrainian drones, they really don't care who dies. It's a huge difference between cultures. Everything you see in this war. And here's another one. This is in Rostov Oblast, just south of the city of Rostov. And within the past 12 hours, these are four distinct headlines. I'll read you what I wrote here. Within the past 12 hours, these four headlines: Russia has expanded their war to the EU while the US is paralyzed. Explosions at oil refineries in Hungary, Romania spark sabotage suspicions. They're suspicious. Who would want to blow up? I mean, this is insane. Romanian intelligence service stops Russian-backed sabotage attempt in Bucharest. This is all in the past 12 hours. Polish authorities detain 8 in suspected sabotage plot, says Tusk. Massive SIM network powering 49 million fake accounts taken apart by Europol. This was up in Latvia. I mean, 49 million fake accounts, you guys. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, pretty much everyone watching this video right now has probably engaged at some point or seen the content produced by one of these 49 million fake accounts. The scale of these operations is it's absolutely mind-boggling. And further on that, on the same day, Poland arrests 7 agents working for, it was actually 8 agents working for Russia and preparing acts of sabotage. Romania's Secret Service releases footage of this morning's capture of 2 Russian agents caught placing bombs inside parcel deliveries intended for later detonation. Europe can continue wishing it away, but Putin is at war. And I'll show you the film here. This is in Romania. So you understand, Putin is 100% at war while the West is not. And merely by giving Ukraine the tools to take out Shahed drone factories right now, or say Russian oil refineries, Russian oil production, that would be the end of all this. It would be the end. No one would have to... how much money do they spend on these operations? Russia has tried to take down 3 commercial airliners just in the past, 18 months in Europe with incendiary devices. And, you'd think that would have been the limit, right? Like, things would have been serious at that point. Poland detains 8 over suspected Russia-linked sabotage, says PM Tusk. 2 suspects were also arrested in Romania for allegedly depositing incendiary devices at an international courier company in Bucharest. This is what Russia is doing every day now, and only expanding these operations. And the oil refinery, I mentioned one of them. This is a Hungarian oil refinery that was burning into this morning, one of the largest in Eastern Europe. Apparently, like 137,000 barrels a day capacity. It's huge. And here it is. So these are the things that Russians are allowed to do now. This is what Europe will put up with. Anyway, you've all seen burning Russian oil refineries. It's rare we see them burning in the civilized world, and I imagine we're going to see more of it because the West just refuses to do anything about it. And the headline, further detail on this: explosions at oil refineries in Hungary, Romania spark sabotage suspicions. Oh, I wonder who it was. Explosions shook a Hungarian and Romanian oil refinery on Monday, 20th of October. Investigations are underway in both cases, and many circumstances remain unknown. Who could it be? That is just a conundrum, isn't it? Who would want to blow up oil refineries? And there's Latvia. Latvian law enforcement officers have exposed a farm of almost 50 million fake accounts. You guys, the scale is just insane. And here's the raid. This is in, I don't know which city in Latvia, but these are all SIM cards so that the social media accounts can be verified, or the Gmail accounts, or the YouTube accounts, or one of the many conduits they use to disseminate propaganda. Massive operation. They seized, millions of dollars, luxury vehicles. Back on the home front, though, things are not looking good down home on the old Russian hellscape. Out of fuel, out of money, out of time. The war has come home. The situation is dire. 6 Russian regions have spent almost all their reserves and are on the brink of budgetary collapse. Yes, this is from Moscow Times. A full-blown budget collapse, a full-blown budget crisis is approaching Russian regions, which faced a significant drop in tax revenues in 2025. See, now they're going to the federal government to get bailouts. But you see, the federal government relies on oil and gas revenue, which has been now totally decimated. I'll read you further on this so people don't think I'm making this stuff up. I see you guys in the comments. You made that shit up. Oh, what? I don't know. I didn't see that on NBC. You will see all this stuff because most of these stories I cover, like a week later, it is somewhere. But I mean, if you get it right from the Russian source, generally it hasn't made it quite through the filter of Western media yet. The situation is dire. 6 Russian regions have spent almost all their reserves and are on the brink of budgetary collapse. I read you the first paragraph. As of September 1st, 6 Russian regions had bank account balances that covered less than 1% of their approved annual budgets, meaning they could only afford 2 to 3 days of expenses from their reserves, according to data from the Expert RA rating agency. Yeah, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but you can go to Moscow Times and read that. And it is not only the budgetary collapse that continues to spiral. I'll read you what I wrote here. Russia's Ufa region spirals further into fuel crisis after Ukrainian strikes target area refinery complex. This is one of the largest in Russia, one of the largest in the world. Actually, 70 cars waiting all weekend for gasoline. And just to bring you the good news I know you need to carry into your day. 70 cars waiting for gasoline, some having waited all weekend in Russia's, this is the Bashkortostan near Ufa, which is, I don't know, something like 1,300 kilometers from Ukraine. Yeah, things aren't getting any better in that there Russian hellscape. Give you an idea where Ufa is. It's way out here. Ukraine's way over here. Everywhere now. There's only like 3 regions that are not affected by the spiraling fuel crisis. And it's not as bad as it's going to be because it takes about 2 weeks. When Ukraine hits a refinery, it takes about 2 weeks for that lack of supply to make it through the chain. And so, I mean, and Ukraine's hitting these things every day. So, anyway, I'll read you what I wrote here. Russia's gasoline crisis only gets worse now with the Far East and Siberia joining Crimea in crisis mode with no gasoline available and strict rationing at all major chains. And these are just notices this is in Siberia. And this is funny. Now that 84% of Russian regions are deeply mired in spiraling fuel crisis, let's remember their threats, Russia's threats, to freeze Europe. And this is just a quick map of the Russian hell state and all the regions that are now mired in a deep and worsening fuel crisis. You remember at the beginning of the war, the propaganda effort, Russia was producing these highly produced propaganda videos that, among other scenes, they had like a German family trying to celebrate Christmas in their home, but they could see their own breath because the home was freezing, because they didn't bow to the mafia gargoyle midget there in Moscow and helped Ukraine. And so Russia cut off the gas, and everyone suffered, and that was the end of it, and Europe just collapsed, right? Right. Yeah, that's how Russia was trying to play this whole thing at the very beginning, you know. And Stratcom's just noting that. I don't know if you remember those, but I tried to find a couple of them, but they all had copyrighted music in the background, and so I didn't want to mess with it. So a lot of people are wondering. But Russia's still pulling all this oil from the ground. Why can't they figure out how to get gasoline into gas tanks? Right. Well, this chart that I saw on Bloomberg the other day is now on Stratcom. I'll elaborate. Unable to refine its own oil due to relentless Ukrainian strikes, Russia is now flooding the world with cheap oil to raise cash, unrefined oil. If Ukraine's allies were to get serious about blocking Russia's shadow tanker fleet, it could be the end for Putin's regime. So, unable to refine their own oil, about here, everything started to go awry in the Russian hell state. Now, what's happening is Russia's now pulling this oil from the ground, completely bypassing the Russian economy and setting it adrift on Russian oil tankers to raise cash at lower and lower prices, by the way, because no one really wants to buy this Russian oil. You know, it's $45 to $47 per barrel now, like $15 under whatever Brent is, 13 to 15 under whatever Brent is trading. So it's completely bypassing the Russian economy. So they're just pulling this oil from the ground. It goes out. They raise this cash, and then that cash goes to missiles, bombs, North Korean weapons factories. The Russian economy is no longer getting any of this. It's all going to Putin's war. The wealth of this massive nation, it's always gone to the elite, and now it's really beginning to bypass the elite, and it's increasingly just going into North Korean weapons factories and capital destruction. And the other means that Russia is now raising money, and this chart is getting wild now. Russia announced some new bond issuances for the rest of the calendar year. I'll just read you what I wrote here. Russian government on target to issue 600% more bonds this year than 2024 in effort to slow the collapse, forcing commercial banks to purchase worthless paper backed by nothing but North Korean missiles flying into Ukrainian apartment buildings. And the orange line at the bottom here is 2024. This is the amount of bonds. Now look at the red. Russia is absolutely, they just announced this yesterday, that they're going to be absolutely blitzing the bond market. And you ask, who's buying them Russian bonds? And well, I've covered this several times, but I know there's 70% of the people that watch this video have never seen one of my videos before, so I have to say it again. The Putin regime is forcing the commercial banks to buy these bonds. Rather than issue loans or messing with corporate bonds and things that help the economy, or maybe lending money to a guy that wants to buy a car or buy his family an apartment, they are putting this cash into bonds. The Russian government then takes that cash and wages war with it, and it also goes into North Korean weapons factories and into slamming ballistic missiles into apartment buildings here in Kyiv. And that is the nature of Russian culture at its purest. And just a little reminder, somebody unearthed this tweet today. I thought it was poignant. Just to remind everybody that the real Putin, when you see the real Putin, right, the skinny-faced, low energy, not the jovial, big-faced guy that's running around, Ukrainian intelligence says, Budanov says there are at least 4 Putin. So the whole, that's a conspiracy theory, you're crazy. No, this is reality. When you see the guy on New Year's Eve in the church in Moscow, or in one of the bunker videos, that is the real Putin. The real Putin looks like somebody's damn grandmother. Okay, when foreign press is allowed to photograph Putin up close, this is from 9 months ago, the old gargoyle looks like someone's grandmother. I tagged the Kremlin on this, and I think it got 600,000 views or something. But just look at this. Put a wig on that. Put an old grandma wig, like one of the old haunted poltergeist grandmas. Put a wig on that. And what do you see? And look at the cheek implants. A clear similarity. How can you not see it? And how can you unsee it? Right? I'm sorry. So what do you do when you look like somebody's grandma and you're waging an unaffordable war and your enemies are at the gates and your economy is collapsing? Well, you arrest musicians and you put them in prison for singing songs that point out what a weak little savage that you are. Putin arrests the 6th musician in a week for singing songs critical of the regime and supporting music group Stop Time, who are sitting in pre-trial detention, facing up to 12 years in prison for performing songs with lyrics such as Old Man in the Bunker. And this is just, he looks like a kid too. And this guy's going to prison for like 12 years. This is what Russia's all about, you guys. It's all about people in cages. Stop Time. He's supporting a band that was thrown in jail last week for leading a sing-song of songs that are banned in Russia. Anyway, he's been now arrested. This is in Ekaterinburg. And this kid looks like he's probably like 20 years old. And that's what you do when you look like somebody's grandma and you are in a bad situation, fighting an unaffordable and unwinnable war, and your budget is collapsing, and your oil revenue has dried up. And here's another critic. This one is really bad, though. This is quite a bit darker. I won't joke about this. Having been jailed by Russian authorities since March of 2024, journalist Olga Komleva has now lost the ability to speak due to horrific conditions. Russian prison is no joke, guys. Everyone is tortured. Everyone is tortured in Russian prison. That's the way it works. She was recently sentenced to 12 years in prison for spreading so-called fake news about the Russian armed forces. Article 207.3 of the Russian Criminal Code of the Russian Federation. And anyway, she has written a letter and describing her horrible conditions. It's a complaint to the government and someone in the, quote, opposition. There are actually a few of them in Russia that aren't mired in brain death propaganda. And what do you do if you can't win militarily, your budget is collapsing, and you look like somebody's grandmother? You increase your propaganda budget by 54%. Russia has increased its propaganda budget a stunning 54% for next year. Despite the reduction of military expenditures in the 2026 budget, funding for propaganda in the Russian Federation will increase by a record 54%. Here's a message from Ukraine's foreign minister. This clearly indicates the priorities of the aggressor state. They cannot win on the battlefield, so they are placing their main bet on disinformation. And here is old Soloviev in his little regime-mandated Dr. Evil suit to get everybody super scared. And here's Medvedev in his little Dr. Evil suit, also scaring the pants off those Western politicians that don't want to, quote, provoke Putin. And further on the propaganda front, Russians have started delivering propaganda leaflets with Shahed drones. Yeah, the occupiers load propaganda leaflets into anti-tank mines, PTM-3, and send them by drone. Above the programmed location, a charge is triggered that should scatter the leaflets. At the same time, the warhead with 30-plus kilograms of explosives remains, so such drones are still dangerous. So it drops the propaganda on the unsuspecting neighborhood, and then it goes, and it's all just like nonsense, like Zelensky's bad, all the same nonsense. But can you imagine in the Russian mind? Like, I've sat right here and seen, out of this window right here, Shahed drones shot down right there, and to me, a Shahed drone is not the bearer of good news. It comes from the savage hinterlands to murder people in this city and in others. And if it dumps a bunch of propaganda on my head before it blows up in an apartment building across the way here, that's not going to convince me of whatever's written on these leaflets. But in the Russian logic, you don't understand. I mean, this is a culture that has had for hundreds of years Russian housewives. They say things and believe in things such as, if he beats, he loves. Think about that. That's one of the cores of Russian culture you have to understand. Wife beating is legal in Russia. Okay, that they honestly believe that they will eventually beat Ukraine enough so that they will learn to love Russia. And big news out of Hungary on October 23rd, 3 days from now, it looks to be probably the largest protests in the country's history are to take place to coincide with the anniversary of the Hungarian Revolution from back in 1956, in which Hungarians succeeded in ousting the Russians for about 3 days in the middle of really what was a 45-year brutal occupation of the country. And I'll just read you what Stratcom wrote about that. Hungary's struggle for freedom under decades of brutal Russian rule lasted almost 45 years. Today, as the Russian-backed Orban regime attempts to drag the country back into darkness, a reminder of October 1956. So I'll just let you see the story here, because this is sort of what happened in those days when brave Hungarians managed to oust the Russians that had turned their country into a hellhole. Basically what the Russians had done to Ukraine before 2014. And Ukraine had the numbers and the means to oust the Russians completely until they came back, of course, in 2022. Hungarians succeeded for 3 days, and they had to wait until 1989 to finish the job. And this is the story of how that happened. It's just 3 minutes.
It was the freedom fighters who controlled the streets. They had won. Untrained civilians had beaten the ruthless Arvo and 2 Soviet divisions. Imre Nagy now called for the removal of the Soviet occupying forces.
So after 5 days of fighting, the Hungarians succeeded in ousting the Russians. Soviet troops left.
On the banks of the Danube, people watched the families of Soviet diplomats packing their bags. The Hungarians who looked on hoped that some support for their stand would come from the West. People read uncensored papers and pamphlets for news of the changes sweeping across the country. Hungarians enjoyed a marvelous few days, a reprieve. Budapest was alive with a new sense of freedom. There was time to treat the wounded. The prisons were opened, and out came the victims of years of repression, including Cardinal Mindszenty.
This particular priest, they ended up starving him to death in a cage later on. The Russians did.
The were worried by Nagy's announcement of free elections, which could mean the end of communist rule. There were also rumors that he intended withdrawing Hungary from the Warsaw Pact, the Eastern European military alliance controlled by the Soviet Union. On Thursday, November the 1st, thousands of Soviet soldiers and tanks crossed back into Hungary. That evening, Imre Nagy broadcast that if the soldiers weren't withdrawn, the government would proclaim Hungarian neutrality and break away from Soviet control. Nagy had gone too far. With growing unrest in several East European countries, the Soviets needed to set an example. Soviet tanks re-entered Budapest early on November the 4th to crush the revolution. The battle was bloody and one-sided. Where resistance was discovered, whole buildings were brought down. The world looked on as the Soviets savagely reimposed their rule on Hungary. Imre Nagy fled to the Yugoslav embassy, but was later arrested by the Soviets and, like hundreds of others, was executed. During the weeks that followed, 200,000 people fled the country, while thousands more were arrested and sent to labor camps. Up to 3,000 Hungarians were killed in their bid for freedom in 1956.
So from 2,500 to 3,000 people were killed by the Russians in 1956. And on the anniversary of that, October 23rd, when everything began, it's going to be, what the Hungarians are telling me is that it will probably be the largest could be the largest protests in the history of the country. And that's very bad news for Orban, who right now is enjoying a lot of propaganda from Western media outlets. The far right is in love with him. And Putin needs Orban to be sort of his saboteur, his bureaucratic saboteur within the EU to prevent sanctions against Russia, financial sanctions, energy sanctions. They're buying tons of oil. And so if Putin loses this, his little Hungarian pet kleptocrat there in the EU, it's going to be a huge loss on the propaganda front, and it's going to be a bureaucratic loss. I mean, the guy nipping at his heels is this guy here, Peter Magyar, and they openly say that they are going to put Orban on trial in the EU, not in Hungary, where he's managed to stack all the judges for the past 15 years. Anyway, but the war that Orban is waging on his opponent, Peter Magyar, is very interesting and very, very Russian. This is Peter Magyar here basically with a tweet this morning. Viktor Orban is waging a hate-filled and dehumanizing campaign against his true challengers, surpassing even the worst Nazi and communist propaganda. Here's what he's talking about here. This is the kind of, I mean, the Orban regime is working with the Russians now in every way, in all forms of propaganda applications. This is Peter Magyar, and this is Orban. Orban is a bestial, obese, he looks like Jabba the Hutt. He's always compared to Jabba the Hutt, from Star Wars, right? And Magyar is like this young, fit dude who just walked across Hungary for to make a statement. The guy runs miles a day, is in the gym, CrossFit. I mean, he's got his stuff together, and Orban is just he's always eating something. He's like Jabba the Hutt, and it's absolutely no contest. Peter Magyar is going to destroy him. He's destroying him in the polls, and he's going to win the elections if Orban allows it to be a fair election, and that's very, very questionable. We imagine that he's probably going to try to go the way of Lukashenko and call Putin, but Putin's not going to answer that phone. So this is going to be a very interesting year for Hungary, and I think it could all begin on the 23rd of October, 3 days from now. And here's some comic relief in dark times, and Putin is just really slamming the slaves at this point. Listen to this. Russian authorities have decided to leave Russians without imported catheters and stents, which is apparently 75 to 80% of the market. Right, and you just know that, anyone within 5 degrees of separation from the Russian dictator wouldn't be caught dead or alive with a Russian catheter, a Russian stent, or a Chinese one for that matter, right? It would only be the best German or Swiss or American. But for the slaves, no. You've got to buy Russian. The Ministry of Industry and Trade has submitted for approval a draft resolution restricting government procurement of imported coronary artery catheters and stents, which account for 75 to 80% of the Russian medical sector, as Vestia reports. Every day in Kyiv, I read you what I wrote. Every morning at 9 a.m., Kyiv stops, coffee shops, grocery stores, main streets. People get out of their cars, giving 1 minute of silence and attention to thoughts of the guys at the front and for the fallen. And this is really how it works. If you're sitting in a coffee shop or at a restaurant and you having your nice little coffee, at 9 a.m., you'll just notice everyone just sort of gets up and just stands there for a moment of silence. Whatever they're doing, they stop texting or they just sit there. If they're outside, they get out of their cars, they stand there. This is the main street through Kyiv right there. Everyone stops in the middle of the road there. Police stop. People get out of their cars to honor the people that are at the front, defending all the rights that so many people in the West just take for granted every day. All these freedoms that you have, someone fought and died for those freedoms. It's a thing that you sort of pay forward. You don't maybe get the benefits of that fight, but your children and grandchildren do, and your society. And that's it for today. So hope everybody has a good one, and remember what is Bearish for Russia is bullish for humanity. Have a good one.